Welcome everyone to today's webinar. My name is Alec Cooley. I'm a senior advisor here with Busch Systems, and I'll be your moderator for today's program. Our program today is focused on airports specifically and waste diversion from airport operations. This is part of Busch Systems' Green Thinking webinar series. And if you're not familiar with Busch Systems, we are a manufacturer and we sell various waste and recycling and diversion bins of many different sorts. We'll talk a little bit more about that at the very end of the program, but for now, we're going to talk about airport diversion, waste diversion. Next slide, please. So we've got a fantastic panel today. We're going to have three speakers approaching this topic from different angles. We're going to start off with Morgan Turner, who is the owner and principal of Airport Zero Waste Consulting. It has many years' experience working specifically in this field with airport waste diversion. She's going to be giving us sort of a general overview primer, where waste is generated in airport situations. Who are the stakeholders? Some of the drivers and the considerations that influence the way waste reduction and diversion programs are set up. After Morgan starts off with that primer, then we will introduce Meredith Danberg-Ficarelli, who is the co-founder and COO of Watts, which is a waste analytics software company and platform. Meredith is going to talk about how their product and their software could be tailored to the airport sector to manage and leverage waste data to help improve recycling and diversion programs. After Meredith, then we will welcome William Calabrese, who is the Manager of Environmental Compliance and Sustainability with LaGuardia Gateway Partners. He's going to be giving a case study presentation about LaGuardia Airport in New York, their Terminal B operations, and how the steps they've taken with building the new facility and integrating waste diversion and reduction into their operations. Then after Bill's done, we're going to come back again. We're going to welcome Morgan back up one more time for sort of a part two, where she's going to focus more specifically on some of the hot topics and current issues that airports are facing on this topic of waste. So that'll round out our program. I anticipate this will be roughly about a 75-minute program, so just keep that in mind. If you do need to run at some point after the first hour or so, just keep in mind that we are recording this, and we'll have both the recording and the slide deck available, posted online to our website in the next day or so, and we'll be sending out an email to everybody who registered for this program. So just keep that in mind if you're not able to stick around for the very end. If we can go to the next slide, please. As I mentioned at the very end of the program, after we've heard all the presentations, I invite folks to stick around. I'll be bringing my colleague, Sarah Hawthorne, from our sales team on to talk a bit about some of the bin products that Busch Systems sells. Again, I encourage folks to stick around for that, and we'll have more information at the very end of this program. Finally, the last thing on my end is just, obviously with a webinar, there's always some restrictions on our ability to interact, but we want to make this as interactive as possible. So I do encourage folks to take advantage of both the chat function and Q&A. So keep in mind, if you have your own experience, some vignettes you want to share, examples, or riff off of things that the speakers have mentioned, I encourage to have an active conversation in the chat section of your Zoom platform dashboard. But if you have questions that you specifically would like the panelists to respond to, put that into the Q&A function. That's where I will be looking for questions to call out loud for the speakers to respond to. So just note if questions go into the chat, we may or may not actually get to those. The best way to address those is in the Q&A platform. So with that, I want to introduce our first speaker, Morgan Turner with Airport Zero Waste Consulting. And Morgan, I'll let you take it from here. Okay. So just 1 second. Cindy, if you have the ability to unmute her line, go ahead and let you do that. There we go.
Thank you very much. I have a little pencil option, but I don't have my mute or video options, so I may be relying on some help there. But thank you so much for having me. Um, Morgan Turner, owner and principal of Airport Zero Waste Consulting. And as Alex said, I'm going to be giving kind of a primer on this specific topic, and then we'll hear some great case study examples, and then we'll come back and talk about hot topics. So the first thing to know when we talk about waste at airports is that well, it seems like it would involve one facility, one organization, and their waste stream. It actually is a very complex environment. And I have the best job that I get to work on this big puzzle, but there are a lot of pieces. So when we talk about waste at an airport, we have a number of stakeholders to think about. The first being the airport authority. So this is typically a department of a city or maybe a county who actually owns the airport facility and operates it. They receive funding from the FAA and also typically from the state. And they make sure the building envelope, the runways, the pavement, sometimes the parking is all ready to go. But they do not actually obviously operate flights or operate restaurants in most cases. So they are the building owner and they're kind of a landlord. The next important stakeholder in the airport waste conversation is the airlines. So these are the folks that operate those flights that deal with your baggage, that get you where you're going, and have lounges, gate areas, flight kitchens, everything that they need to make sure that your flight is an on-time and pleasant experience. So they have their own waste streams, and they are considered a tenant of the airport authority. Then, of course, we have our concessionaires, so our restaurants on the food and beverage side, or maybe our retail shops on that side. And they're also tenants of the airport authority. So they operate their storefronts, they may operate brands on a franchise basis, but they're going to generate their own waste streams as well. Then we have our friends at the Transportation Security Administration or the TSA. They are there by federal mandate. They are considered a tenant, although they are required to provide those services. So they're going to have their own interesting waste streams. So those are kind of our big stakeholders. And then there are going to be these layers of relationships and contracts. So the airport authority may have a custodial contractor. These may be airport authority employees or city employees, or it may be a third party vendor. The airlines may have their own custodial unit for their spaces, as well as the concessionaires may do that with their food service staff, or they may have a separate team. Then our airlines are going to have their cabin cleaning crews. These are the folks that make sure in 7 minutes or less the aircraft is cleaned, vacuumed, trash removed, and ready to go for the next flight. Flight catering, these are the folks that make sure all your pretzels and sodas are on board, or your meals if it's a longer flight. And then ground handling. So these would be folks that make sure the aircraft are fueled, make sure the baggage is moved. Sometimes they're involved in the movement of waste as well. And then, of course, can have an airport without passengers. So these are the folks who are flying here and there. They're eating in the restaurants, they're shopping in the stores, and they're generating waste through their activities. And then we have our waste haulers. So typically, an airport authority would have a contract with a hauler, could be a national, like a Waste Management or a Republic Services, could be a local. And they may own their own trucks to haul as well. So these are all the moving pieces when we talk about waste at an airport. So just to give some visuals of some of these, the airport authority typically will have an administration office. This may be a small group for a small airport, could be hundreds of people for a large airport, but they will have kind of office waste from paperwork and other functions. And then the airport authority is typically responsible for public spaces that are not designated to one of the tenants. So these would be your gate areas, your restrooms, your passenger circulation, could be your curbside at the airport, or maybe even in the parking lot. So that's typically where they're looking at waste. And then we talked about they have their custodial teams. So they'll be servicing those areas, including at the checkpoints. We can see here our liquid collection station. So the custodial team is a really important part of the waste program at an airport. We have our airlines. So again, we always think about in-flight and the in-flight collection, but also what happens at the gate stations with the passenger manifests, the crew manifests, all that paperwork. And then in our lounges, these experiences include sometimes an buffet, and they're certainly going to have a great coffee station. So, what kind of waste is coming out of an airline lounge? It's a restaurant. And so then we have our cabin cleaning. Again, these are the crews that make that plane spick and span so it can get on its next journey. The middle photo is a flight kitchen. This happens to be a partner called LSG Sky Chefs. They operate flight catering operations on behalf of some of the airlines. So these are the meal carts or maybe the soda carts. And then ground handling. So those folks who are managing anything that needs to come off the plane or go on the plane for its next service. Concessions, these are pictures of obviously food and beverage, whether it's a coffee shop or a food court. And then we have some retail operations here as well. If you've traveled a lot, you're familiar with those options. Then our passengers. So passengers on the left are waiting for security screening. Passengers on the right are waiting to fill their water bottles and use the restroom. So certainly generating different types of waste. TSA, we're all very familiar with the 311 liquids rule, does still catch some folks off guard. So there's a waste stream generated there. The middle photo shows some of the new CT scanners, which hopefully will scan liquids and maybe change some of those rules, but definitely some interesting waste streams generated at the TSA. I believe this week is TSA's Prohibited Items Week. And so they are sharing lots of interesting photos on their Instagram and X feeds of the items that people try and bring through security. And then the photo on the right shows the liquid collection station that's just in line with security screening. And then waste hauler, like I said, we might have a national, like a Republic Services shown here servicing a large roll-off compactor, or the airport authority may own their own trucks, which is the case here on the right. That's a beautiful truck owned by City of Philadelphia Department of Aviation. So when we talk about waste streams, airports generate municipal solid waste, so kind of regular trash, including recyclables, compostables, and other recoverables. They're certainly going to have big projects, so they'll have construction and demolition waste. Could be things from horizontal work like runways and service roads, so concrete and asphalt. Could be vertical projects, so having other building materials. They'll also have to deal with international waste. So international waste is material that arrives from a flight that originated outside the US or Canada. In the US's case, we give Canada a pass. And that material has to be treated, autoclaved, incinerated, or otherwise treated to destroy any pathogens that might be coming from the point of origin, just to protect our agricultural industry from those pests. And then hazardous or other special waste. So certainly they're generating chemicals, they're generating e-waste, universal waste like batteries and bulbs or lamps. So airports have a lot of waste streams to think about. Some of the things that might be in the trash that have been a particular challenge for airports would be plastic film and whether this is recyclable or divertible in their area and whether they can bag their recycling. And then gloves. This photo is certainly from the COVID era, but gloves are used heavily in the airport environment for food service, cleaning, and security screening. The recyclables are fairly typical. Certainly you would expect water bottles, aluminum cans, some glass, especially where we have bar service or some of the nice wine bar options. And then the cardboard. The amount of cardboard that comes out of an airport is almost unbelievable. Everything that's brought in has to be screened to make sure it can go into that sterile space and not serve as a safety issue on the other side. So the amount of cardboard that comes in on pallets, gets unpacked, gets checked, is pretty incredible. This is probably my favorite slide I've ever made. It's very beautiful, lots of colors, but certainly food waste is a big topic for airports. We can see here some of the prep items from peeling mangoes or other fruits like pineapples. The third photo shows like the tops of onions and tomatoes, and then certainly paper towel. So airports have a number of restrooms. They have a high throughput. And so how do we collect paper towel potentially for composting? Then recoverables. So not the most flattering photo of me, but it's not uncommon for me to see that airports are changing the paper products in their restrooms on a service schedule to make sure no one is left stranded before their flight. And so in that, we are generating a number of partial rolls of toilet paper or paper towel. And some airports have figured out how to collect that and donate that to organizations that help unhoused individuals or to food pantries and otherwise. And then photo on the right would be maybe some toiletry items, depending on their condition, whether they're still sealed, whether they could be donated to similar organizations. Certainly, you would have other lost and found items. Neck pillows are a big one, unclaimed luggage. There are many items that could also be recovered and donated or reused that are generated at an airport. So when airports think about their waste program, they have some things driving them forward and some things kind of working as a headwind. So when we talk about an aircraft in flight, we talk about the four forces. So we have lift, we have drag, we have, oh, I'm going to blank on the other two. I'm going to think of it in the question session. But we have these forces that work together to thrust is another one to get us off the ground and get our airplane in the air. And so airports similarly have these forces working in balance. So driving airports forward to deal with their waste would be things like regulation and requirements, especially our friends in the state of California or otherwise. Cost. Airports pay a lot of money to move waste off-site. And it's kind of a double payment because they're paying to bring materials through, to screen those materials, and then they're sending things out as waste. So we're bringing in toilet paper and paper towel, putting it in a restroom, just to pull it out and send it out. So we want to look at the cost and then other airports. So maybe William will touch on this, but airports are always watching what other organizations are doing and how they're moving the whole industry forward. So there is some competitive nature with the airports. And then industry drivers, certainly there's a big focus on the industry, in the industry on carbon accounting. The airport carbon accreditation program has become very popular where airports um, inventory their greenhouse gas or carbon impact and then commit to reducing that with their partners, with the airlines, and then also within their operations. Airports do have waste goals. 2030 is a big popular deadline for some of these goals, so we'll be seeing a lot of movement in the next couple of years. And then the concept of circular economy. So who's responsible for these materials? How were they manufactured? And how can we get them back into the system rather than a linear use and dispose process? So airport challenges, certainly passenger behavior is one that airports mention a lot. Airports are flying, sorry, passengers are flying through airports from all over the world, all over the country. They may or may not have recycling or composting at home. So how do we convince them to follow our programs in these spaces? Security restrictions, certainly the liquid restrictions, which have been in place for decades, is still a challenge at the checkpoint. We still see a lot of material generated there. Only certain things can pass through and go on a flight. So the things that cannot do get thrown away. Labor, making sure we have enough folks to safely handle the material on the custodial side, on the cabin cleaning side, flight catering, and the ground handling. How do we have enough hands to help with that work? Cost, all of this costs money. And partner practices, so making sure that each of those tenants that we talked about has the same goal, whether that's the restaurants or the shops or the airlines. Certainly, they have customer experience expectations. They want to have beautiful menus. They want to offer flights to multiple destinations. They want to have a really top-notch lounge experience. So how do we balance those amenities that we're providing with the waste that they generate? And then decentralization. This is a really specific one, but sometimes the airport authority will have a contract for waste hauling and for those containers, compactors or dumpsters. And then each of their tenants may have their own. So the restaurants may have their own compactors or dumpsters and hauler, or the airline, or both. So decentralization is a challenge. If the airport authority doesn't manage all of that, they may not have access to data. And then in terms of challenges within the industry, certainly contamination, making sure we're getting the right things in the right bin, reducing waste in general. Material markets, making sure that we are putting recycled content in the things that we purchase, or we're requiring that in the things we purchase. And so we're maintaining the value of that cardboard, plastic, paper, aluminum, and glass. Mergers and acquisitions, folks on the call are probably really familiar with the way that the industry has been changing and the number of options that airports might have to partner with. And then data availability. So this is going to weave through all of our presentations, but airports are still working on how to get insight, not just to the amount of waste that they generate, but some of the finer points of where it's coming from and where it's going. So in terms of airport waste requirements, these happen at all levels, federal, state, city, and county, and then also airport policy. So airports have to look at all of those levels. Some best practices that airports have implemented to address waste include setting goals, certainly prioritizing reduction and avoidance, reusing and encouraging others to reuse, donation, including food and other items, liquid collection, certainly recycling and composting. We do try and treat that as a tertiary or third level strategy and go to these other ones first. Waste to energy. There are airports located in areas where waste to energy is prevalent, and so their material goes there instead of to a landfill disposal. And then ESG reporting or carbon accounting. So, how do we track the impact of waste on an apples to apples basis with maybe some of the other decisions that airports are making? So real quick, we'll go through some photos of these best practices. If you've flown recently, hopefully you've been finding convenient water bottle filling stations to use your reusable bottle again and again. And the middle photo shows refrigerators that were set up by an airport authority to collect surplus food for donation to a local organization. And then on the right-hand side, we have the pour away liquid collection stations. So challenges, we talked about material markets, we talked about some of those other things that are happening in the industry. Specifically for airports, contamination remains a challenge, especially liquids, whether that's on the pre-security side with the liquid restrictions or in the food courts where you've got lots of ice that has now melted and is in with your materials. Loss capture, those things that are recyclable but just are not making it there. Pallets or bulky items. Deliveries coming to an airport often come on a pallet. So who owns that pallet? Who owns it if it's broken? Does it go in the regular dumpsters? Pallets are kind of a thorn in the side of the airports. Working on solutions like reusable pallets. And then education signage, reporting and feedback that's fairly generic or umbrella. So for the whole facility, we're sending the same message about the materials. We're giving the same feedback to all our restaurants or airlines. And this is a place where data could really change things. So lots of types of airport data, including composition, some more not flattering photos of me doing waste stream composition studies to estimate contamination and loss capture. Certainly, we need data about volume, just how much material. We need data about sources. Where is it coming from? Is it coming from a coffee bar? Is it coming from a wine bar? Is it coming from the lounge? And we need to get specific about the sources. What are the costs? What are the financial costs, as well as labor, space, and other resources that we're using? Something that's really important for airports to keep data on is what's called foreign object debris or FOD. And I think outside of the aviation environment, we would consider this litter, but these are materials that are potentially blowing out of the dumpsters or falling off of luggage and could cause a problem to the aircraft or attract wildlife. Another piece of data that's really interesting is when containers are serviced or if that service is missed. So if someone is parked in front of a compactor and it can't be serviced, how often does that happen? How often is a compactor overloaded? How often is there a overweight fee? Tracking those service events is really important. And then calculating greenhouse gas emissions and other impacts. So what are the economic impacts? What are the environmental impacts? And what are the social impacts? So if we have good data, we can quantify the impacts of our program, positive food donation, and negative, some of those footprints, increase the efficiency of the program, collect on rebates and credits. So if we have good data and we're owed for certain materials, we can follow up on that. We can project and anticipate trends. So if we know our waste generation goes up during a spring break travel season, over the holidays, and when we're welcoming World Cup or Super Bowl fans, we can project and anticipate those trends. We can prioritize diversion strategies so we can show whether it's worth working on a glove recycling program or a cardboard program, which one should be prioritized. And we can support that ACA accreditation and other reporting. So with that, I think Meredith's going to talk about how we might get that data and otherwise use it.
Great. Thank you, Morgan. Yeah, so with that, I'm going to hold. We have a couple questions that have come in. I'm going to
Okay.
hold them for now, and let's go ahead and bring Meredith up, and then we'll come back to questions at the very end.
Great. Can everybody hear me?
Yep, we can hear
Okay.
you. I'll
Thank you.
take it from here.
All right. Thanks, Morgan. I'm Meredith, co-founder of Watts Waste Analytics Software. Thanks for having me. So before I jump in, I actually wanted to dig in a little bit to one of the things that Morgan said. She was talking about sources of waste within an airport or within a terminal. I talk about sources too in this presentation, and I wanted to make sure the distinction is clear. The sources that Morgan was talking about, I might refer to as generators. Those are the specific generators of the waste. So a coffee shop versus a bar versus a lounge. The sources that I'll be digging into are the data sources. Who actually sends the data? Who owns the data? Is it this vendor or that vendor, or is it this particular stakeholder? So just wanted to make sure that was clear. Moving along. So at the highest level, to kick us off here, waste is a non-metered utility. It looks like other utilities. It's integrated into budgets and cost forecasts. There are consistent services, sometimes consistent services, and there are stakeholder relationships, but waste is often ignored because of how difficult the data is to manage. And Watts is a platform that is purpose-built for waste with a data model that supports the way that waste data needs to be managed, where an organization has sites. In the case of airports, within a site, which might be a terminal, there are concessions within that site or within that terminal. This is a customizable concept in Watts. You might see the word tenant in some of my later screens. Watts, then waste streams are associated with sites and with concessions, and waste streams have different types of data. And we'll get into some of these data sources. And this is really the foundation of Watts, that connectivity between all of these components. You can think of Watts like a vacuum that sucks up all of your waste data, reducing the manual workload and really automatically digitizing context about waste operations. And because waste is not a metered utility, there's not always one data source that can be used for every waste stream, for every vendor, for every site. It's often an exercise of really stitching together context to be able to deliver a confident and whole data picture, pulling information from these multiple sources to tell that complete story. And we're really not just talking about tonnage data here. Watts is data source agnostic because there's other valuable information associated with waste streams, like who the vendor is, the costs, what the infrastructure is, the removal schedules. And these details can come from invoices, but they can also come from other sources like tonnage reports or site level operations, doing a walkthrough, sensors, and a lot more. And in the same way that Watts is data source agnostic, the software is also waste stream and vendor agnostic. Companies often focus really only on their standard streams like trash, recycling, cardboard, because usually that's an easier relationship to manage, or it's, the sustainability stakeholder might be engaged in kind of that information. But there's a lot more complexity. Morgan mentioned a lot of different waste streams and a lot of different operational kind of complexities, food donations as one example. And that would have a different vendor than your standard cardboard or compost recycling. And Watts is the place where all this information is really organized, both to benefit the sites and the organization as a whole. So we built tools to solve for these different pain points. Collect, this first step or first stage, is about data acquisition. It's bringing data into our ingestion pipeline. Digitization then really tackles the challenges of vendors reporting in a lot of different formats. Morgan mentioned an apples to apples need. That's really what this is about. It's getting it all into one format, one frequency, or rather meeting the frequency that the vendor or the data provider has, because we're not trying to change too many systems. We know how complicated that can be. To really create a single apples to apples home for all waste data. Normalization, that third step, that's where the magic happens. It's giving organization-specific context to allow users to dig into a particular question or concern, waste stream, time frame, passenger, tons per passenger, for example. And all of this is designed around waste. And then optimization is really once the data house is in order, the goal is to be able to use waste data for ongoing decision-making and optimization rather than just reporting. So piecing together all of these different data sources, carefully parsing files, we can have this waste-related context and actually build waste management plans for every location automatically. So this is an example of a site that has 6 waste streams, 5 vendors, and we've also ingested the service schedule and the infrastructure for those different waste streams. And when this context is available, it can become a comparative data source so that Watts can see this is the estimated monthly tonnage based on the schedules at this location, but the invoice says something else. And it gives us an opportunity to dig in and really begin to optimize or understand where those discrepancies are coming from. We built our own waste-specific data extraction tool. And here we can see on the left a sample invoice from a waste vendor, and then on the right, how Watts parses and extracts that data. And we're doing this for all data sources, not just for invoices. We are setting up kind of a unique process for every client. I'm going to skip this slide because I do want to get to some of the meat of the presentation here. But the point here is that while automating data acquisition is important, making it easy to have the vendor CC a unique email address so that the data starts coming into Watts whenever it's coming to your airport. Understanding where there are gaps is also really complicated. It can be super complex and also really time consuming. So part of the idea is to really visualize where are we good? Where are we in the green? The data has been received, and where are we in the red? Where do we need to follow up with a vendor or set up an automation so that we can get that data into the system faster and in front of ourselves faster? So these standard KPIs are front and center. We've got diversion, total tonnage, cost, carbon emissions, and these are all fed through the EPA's WARM model, the emissions are. And then there are charts for all of these things that allow for kind of a drill down into the facility level, the site level, et cetera. So getting into the airport challenges, it is hard to understand the amount of waste that's generated at the concession level. So specifically kind of in a terminal scenario. The priority is really to ensure that waste is removed in a timely manner, but the proportion that each concession generates is pretty opaque. Someone might know, oh, that business is much busier than that business, so they're going to generate more waste, but how much? It's hard to do without really measuring it. And the cost of waste, it can often be baked into the cost of rent. And there really aren't any incentives for concessions to focus on waste diversion, even if there's a policy in place that encourages or even requires it. And airport terminals aren't alone. It's a challenge across industries. So for terminals and airports that are working to improve diversion, this lack of waste generator transparency makes it hard to understand where to act, where to start. Spot checks or site assessments can really give insight into where diversion behavior is in place, where it's going well, where there are opportunities to improve. But without a mechanism to really check it consistently and drive behavioral change, the process can get stuck. And I mentioned that airport terminals really aren't alone in facing the challenge of encouraging and requiring concessions to separate their waste, recognizing that it happens across all industries. But terminals are in a unique position to act on it by measuring waste at the generator level and using that data to structure waste fees for the concessions, where trash is the most expensive and recycling is cheaper. This is known as a pay-as-you-throw system. Earlier this year, we started collaborating with an airport terminal in the middle of a massive renovation project. And they're opening their doors later this fall. And they wanted to do that with a best-in-class waste program in place, both to align with their local authorities' diversion mandate, and so they knew that they would be operating responsibly. And they wanted to use tech to support their efforts and to understand how they could incentivize participation across their diverse and obviously very busy concessionaires. And we introduced the idea of the janitorial team counting bags at the concession level to provide data on waste generation and to tie diversion behavior back to billing. So as I mentioned, the pricing is that trash is more expensive than the other waste streams, and those fees are clear based on the data that's gathered when the janitors are doing their work. So Watts Surveys is the name of this tool. It's mobile friendly. It doesn't need a Watts account. There's no app to download. The survey is just accessible in a link. which in the case of this partnership is integrated into the janitorial team's work order platform. So they're using the same device that they're already using during their workday. And the survey tool remembers their name to make the process a little bit more efficient throughout the day. So you can see on this screen that the user is asked to select the tenant. In this case, it's a sub-entity. In this case, it's a concession. And it was our client's preference that at each concession, the janitorial team they would click the same link and they would see a whole list of all of those potential concessions. Another option could be that there's a QR code just at that one stop. So inside the door of a waste cabinet, for example, and they scan the QR code, it opens up the survey just for that one concession. It's all fully customizable, but this is the process that this client of ours requested. And the data to be entered is also fully customizable. So currently, Watts can accept weight data, container count data, so just how many containers are there, and fill level, which is what I'm going to show you in a second. And this client will also be collecting bag counts from elsewhere in the terminal. But what this screen is showing are the different waste streams that are included in this survey and the infrastructure, in this case, bags associated with that. We can see that trash, recycling, and compost each have a different colored bag. And it's possible that as the project kicks off, some of this might adapt and evolve, and the platform is fully adaptable. So the survey user, they would use their finger on the screen to either slide or tap to indicate how full a bag is. And then they would save the entry by clicking save at the bottom of the screen. They're then brought back to the waste stream collection page, and we can see a temporary banner right at the top confirming that trash data was accepted. And now the trash tile in these 3 tiles says completed. And the save data button at the bottom is still grayed out until data has been entered for all 3 tiles, so that the kind of supervisor level can confirm that every stop assessed every waste stream instead of data sort of accidentally being missed. And we can see those empty options in the left-hand screens, which someone would use if there was no waste at all for that waste stream at that stop. Once all of the chips are completed, the Save Data button pops up, and the user can save data, and then they're automatically brought back to the tenant selection screen to start the process again for the next concession, I should say. So it shows the total number of completed and incomplete surveys and that concession selection, so the user can keep track of their progress. 2 more quick slides here. So our goal is to deliver a data-centric narrative that really helps the user take action. And in the case of these surveys that we just looked at, users can understand waste composition, site comparisons, completion rate, and more. And the end result of this concession level data capture will be pay-as-you-throw pricing, the ability for the terminal to implement pay-as-you-throw pricing at the concession level. There are 2 levels of data progression that have to happen in the terminal in order for this to work. The hauling vendor will send an invoice for all of the standard waste generated. So for the trash, recycling, compost, or maybe there are multiple vendors, multiple invoices, that's fine too. We're just thinking about what the total cost is for those services in a particular month or in a particular time frame. And once we step inside the terminal, there are multiple generators contributing to that total waste amount. It's not just the concessions. So Watts will support entity level proration between concessions, offices, lounges, other spaces that might exist in the terminal. And that proration will be based on the bag counts that are going to be gathered by the janitors. And then once Watts knows the proportion of total waste that just the concessions are generating, Watts can apply a second level of proration based on that fill level data that I was showing being collected by the janitors as they go through their stops. And with trash being priced as the most expensive waste stream and composting and recycling cheaper, the idea is that there will be a cost incentivization for participation in those diversion programs so that the concessions can see savings associated with that action. I'm really excited to chat more, and thank you so much for being here.
Great. Thank you, Meredith. Watts is doing lots of great stuff. It's a great platform that you guys have there.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think you addressed this with one of your slides, but there was a question about hazardous waste. That is something also that the Watts platform can manage. That correct?
Yes, absolutely. Any waste stream that someone might have can be adjusted into Watts. It's about being able to receive data. So that might come from an invoice, it might come from a tonnage report, site level data collection. But yes, hazardous waste is accepted.
Yeah, great, good. Again, we have some more questions, but we'll hold the rest of them for the end.
Great.
So with this, William, I'll let you take it from here and learn a little bit more about the work that you're doing with LaGuardia's Terminal B.
Great. Thanks so much, Alec. My name is Bill Calabresi. I am the manager for environmental compliance and sustainability here at LaGuardia Terminal B. And so a little over 10 years ago, LaGuardia Gateway Partners was selected to redevelop and operate the new Terminal B at LGA. This was replacing the old Central Terminal building, which you may have known and flown through and all certainly loved. But our job was encompassed the full design, build, finance, operate, and maintain this terminal through 2050. And if I can get next slide, maybe. So we have the launch following redevelopment was, I would say, fairly successful, and received many sort of accolades, and have now seen the challenge really to maintain that standard all the way through the extent of our lease. We achieved a LEED Gold rating in 2023, both for building design and construction, but also for operation and maintenance. We're currently in the process of recertifying that, and the waste diversion performance aids us in achieving these standards. And if you go next slide as well. And one more. Thank you. So a quick overview of our operations here. Terminal B represents about half the flights serving LGA and most of the airlines. We have 7 operators currently at the terminal: American, United, Southwest, JetBlue, Air Canada. Joining us last year was Porter, and also have Frontier serving us, with about 500 daily flights and around 50,000 passengers enplaned daily. For these guests, we have around 70 restaurants, shops, and lounges, including most recently the Capital One landing you can see at the right, which launched and is overseen by Chef Jose Andre. Next slide, please. So we have a number of requirements that are driving our waste program. The LGP partners maintain our own kind of goals on sustainability and report on our performance annually, both translated into emissions, but also overall our waste performance in general. We also have this built into our lease, and so part of the renegotiation was making sure we have a improved program set up as part of the terminal. And this is something that had included a 40% diversion goal and expanded organics. But the details were to be left to us to figure out how we got there. And then a few years as we were also working into operation, we were impacted by the new commercial waste zone phase-in. LGA was in the pilot zone, which helped both on one side set price caps and service standards. On the other side also led to some consolidation in the industry, and had to us to reassess our overall services with our Carter. Next slide, please. So we had a fun task as we moved from construction, where we were both maintaining the existing operations within the central terminal building, but also phasing in new gates and buildings as we were building Terminal B and closing down portions of the old building. So maintaining those waste operations across a variety of buildings that are both being constructed and deconstructed, I think was an interesting opportunity. But really, as we moved into full operations, allowed us to reassess where we stood and the great opportunities for improvement. As we were in that new kind of like startup phase, our waste diversion was around 23%. And next slide, please. And so getting back to some of Meredith's points, one of our main concerns as we were undertaking that task was trying to understand our waste data overall. Beyond kind of like what we were seeing in our Carter invoices and waste reports. So we conducted a comprehensive waste audit, the first for our terminal, looking across all of our major waste drivers, airlines, looked at bathrooms, food and beverage, lounges, our office spaces, really everything. And this was aligned with our lead requirements, but also was done by the Common Ground Compost Group, but also with volunteer support from LaGuardia Gateway Partners, including much of our executive team who led their hands in sorting and weighing some of our waste. Next slide. And in looking at that waste, I think there was some things maybe not so surprising and other things that really stood out to us. The waste was really being driven by guests, food and beverage, and airlines. And of those, we really saw food and beverage and passenger areas as being the great opportunities where we had more control. Airlines really focused on trying to turn around flights. And so that's something that we're looking at as more of a longer term strategy where we have to improve those collections and sorting coming off our planes. And then looking at the individual waste streams, what really stood out was both organics and liquid in our trash, which was comprising over half of our trash weight. So moving into our strategies, next slide. The first thing we looked at was maintaining more consistent signage. So how we're improving our ability to collect waste and improve just what we're putting out to our guests. So using the Recycle Across America standard signs throughout the terminal. So even if you're in an office space, you'll see the same kind of signs if you're a guest out in a hold room in the terminal. In some of our higher volume areas, you'll also see the Oscar sort system that we have here pictured here. So it's just another sort of nudge for the guests to sort their waste properly. We also expanded our organics collection beyond the kitchens into guest-facing areas, really focused again around the food courts and making sure we're capturing our food waste at those sources from our passengers. Next slide. We also looked at our back of house improvements. So rolling out improved training, reinforcing that training at periodic intervals, really kind of annually, making sure, again, the consistency in our bins that they're seeing back of house is all the same. So there can really minimize the mix-ups that come from our janitorial teams as they're making those pickups. And then really focusing on enforcement of our bag colors from clear, blue for recycling, and green for organics. And making sure they have inventory of those bags at all times. Next slide. And finally, especially as we are moving into that new commercial waste zone pilot and offering something of like a reset with our Carter, taking a comprehensive look at our services that they were providing and if there were new opportunities for new services. So this included a dedicated employee from the Carter who is on site and can focus on compliance and making sure our loading dock operations were moving smoothly. We also installed some remote monitors within our compactors, so they'll signal our Carter when those compactors are full and can prevent overflow situations. This can be really helpful in some of those peak periods Morgan was talking about. Most recently, of course, coming off the World Cup, but we have US Open ongoing currently. This brings a lot more passengers into our terminals. And then improving our protocols for loading dock use. A lot of outreach to the airlines, and then a lot of focus with our janitorial teams. So finally, this has led in a very short time, allowed us to grow our diversion rate from around 23% in 2023. And within 18 months, we are pretty consistently hitting over 50% diversion and have more or less stood right around that rate since then. We're looking at further opportunities to kind of go beyond the low-hanging fruit that we've sort of already picked. And so this might look at green leases, reducing sort of packaging requirements to take some of the volume out of our waste streams overall, and improving those airplane waste operations for that waste coming off the flights. And we are continuing to conduct annual waste audits. Now we're really focusing on those concession partners. Now that we have, we think, a fairly solid program for the rest of the terminal, but reinforcing the performance of the individual operators, sharing those in forums, and then doing some targeted outreach to make sure that they are hitting their marks and consistently delivering through our program. So with that, that is sort of the overview of waste for Terminal B, and we can move into our Q&A. Great.
I've had the chance of flying into LaGuardia in recent years, and I gotta say, it is a beautiful facility, and it's great to see what you guys have done, especially on with the waste reduction side. So before we go to Q&A, I'm going to bring Morgan back up again for just a sort of a quick sort of a part B, talking about some of the current events and sort of hot topics. So Morgan, I'll hand it back over to you.
Thank you. And sorry for my brain fart earlier. The four forces of flight are lift, gravity, thrust, and drag. I promise I passed my private pilot's exam. Just wanted to make sure that I corrected the record there. So if you needed those. So in terms of hot topics in airport waste lately, certainly reuse is getting a lot of much needed attention. So it's, top of the hierarchy with reduction. It's a preferred strategy. And so we're seeing a lot of great pilots and new programs in reusable serviceware. There were airports that had shared reusable plates and other serviceware in some of their concession operations prior to COVID. Did take a pause during that situation, and then those are coming back and being expanded. So how can we serve meals that passengers are going to consume at the facility on reusable serviceware that can then be cleaned and reused? So also good use cases within the airport administration offices for their events and meetings and festivities. So lots of good reuse happening, as well as other donation opportunities like suitcases, car seats and strollers, and some of those items. Extended producer responsibility. So this is a big topic for everyone. But with some of the regulations that are being implemented on a state-by-state basis, airports may be eligible to be considered a service provider, depending on the scope and scale of their program. And I know Jeremy Webb is on from Seattle-Tacoma International Airport, kind of leading the charge in this area, but making sure that airports have the data they need to show that they're handling certain materials that are covered by an EPR regulation, that they're providing education, signage, bins, hauling, separation, and eligible for some of those funds is a really kind of emerging topic that we're discussing on the airport side. Single-use plastic requirements. This has been in place at a number of airports for a number of years now, but it is expanding. So reducing the amount of plastic that's brought in, whether that's for ocean-bound plastic concerns or microplastic concerns or just recyclability of certain plastics. Plastic restrictions are gaining traction. Standardized metrics. And so airports are looking for ways to compare their program to other facilities, to compare based on passenger levels, to compare making sure that if their numbers include their admin building, the other airports do as well. How do we look at those numbers that William just put up and say whether we're keeping pace with LaGuardia or behind or ahead? And so looking for standardized metrics of how we're calculating these values. And then third-party certification. So whether that's a true zero waste certification for certain facilities or otherwise, how do we validate and show trust in the numbers that are being reported, including making sure that we don't have data gaps and we're showing a real picture of our programs. So those are all some hot topics, some photos here. This is a side-by-side of two beverage coolers at different airports. The first being obviously a lot of products available in plastic. It's convenient, it's lightweight. The containers are resealable. So here you can see the left cooler is entirely plastic with sodas and waters and sports drinks. And then on the right-hand side, we've got some glass at the top with the coffee drinks, but then plastic throughout this particular cooler. And then this is a photo from Oakland International Airport in California. They've gone plastic free in their concessions. And so we can see those same products, water, sports drinks, energy drinks, juices available in either aluminum or glass. So just a hot topic and something I think you're going to see more and more, whether it's as a passenger or on the material side, handling a lot more aluminum and maybe some glass, maybe some boxes compared to the plastics. So if you want to learn more about waste at airports, I know that there have been resources dropped in the chat from Meredith and from William. In addition, you could look at the sustainability or ESG report from your local airport or the airport that you're working with. You could look at their waste management and waste diversion plan if those are public. And then if you want to see kind of an overview of the industry in 2017, there was an airports cooperative research program synthesis project, and full disclosure, I did author this document, but it looked at 20 case study airports and what their practices were and what their goals were and where they were going. There have been some advancements for some of the programs. COVID definitely was a hiccup for others, but it'll give a good primer of how waste moves through an airport and why it's so challenging and what some of the achievements have been. Thanks.
Great. Thank you, Morgan. And yeah, just pointing out that I did put just now the link for both of those for the ACRP synthesis into the chat if folks are looking for that link. And I will also point out that all of these resources I've been putting into the chat will also be archived along with the recording and the slides on our website. So when you see that email coming around in the next day or two, you'll be able to find all of these on our website. So keep an eye out for that. So thank you, all three of you. Lots of great information, great efforts that each one of you are making. So we'll start off with, got a couple questions here. So I'll start off. I had one from Billy. This may be more for you, Morgan, but again, anyone feel free to respond. But how does an airport authority handle the confiscated banned items like hazardous materials that are coming through TSA? Is it the airport authority who's responsible for that, or is it TSA who is responsible for items other than firearms?
Sure. Yeah, so happy to speak with what I understand from the TSA. Some of their protocol is restricted to civilian access. So, but typically for most airport authorities, and this could depend on the size, a smaller airport might work things a little bit differently. Typically, the TSA will have a vendor set up through the GSA, so the central purchasing department within the federal government that will handle those materials as regulated or hazardous waste. So TSA will typically separate if something was considered hazardous because it's flammable or because it's toxic, and they will dispose of it through that program. And so that would be, I mean, I guess the bottom line, funded by federal taxpayers. It's a service that the TSA pays for and then we all pay for. If it's something like a weapon, typically that is handled through the airport's police department. So whether that's someone in the Customs and Border Patrol office, depending on where the flight originated, or whether it's someone with the local police department or the airport police department, those items are typically handled through that process. So the airport may be responsible for handling some of those things if they're disposed of pre-security and they're not removed through the TSA screening process, but they have a process to deal with it, and then the airport would have their process as well. And just fun fact, the TSA will tell you they do not confiscate items. You have alternatives. If you are traveling with a full-size hairspray that's flammable, you can always put it in your checked bag. You can always give it to a friend who's not traveling, take it back to your car. So it's just when we talk about their protocols and whether that becomes waste, they will emphasize that they give you alternatives versus just needing to dispose of all these things as hazardous materials.
Yeah, great. Um,
Mhm.
there's a question that Anna put in that actually very much it's something I've always been curious about, better understanding the waste that's coming off of the airplanes for arriving flights and how that gets handled. And I know there's some distinctions between international flights and domestic, but
Sure.
yeah,
Yeah, so
go ahead, Morgan.
uh, I'm so happy this question came up. I always love the opportunity to talk on this, and maybe William has some experience to share from LaGuardia. But so waste that comes off of a domestic flight, if it's separated in flight, it can be recycled, even in the future, potentially composted. Typically, that's handled through the flight catering operations or the cabin cleaning. And then for international flights, there actually is an exemption from the United States Department of Agriculture, the USDA, where if recyclables are separated in flight and kept clean of food and dairy products, vegetable and dairy products, they can be recycled. And so word is spreading about that with the airports, so that we don't need to autoclave or incinerate recyclables that came off an international flight. But they're handled in the same way in terms of they are bagged in a particular bag color. They are placed in containers that are typically sealed and then taken to either an on-site autoclave or off-site processing facility. So we can recycle from international flights. We're just not quite got that process sorted out at a number of places yet.
Yeah, Bill, let me know if you had anything you wanted to add to that or not. Or okay. That's good to hear because I've heard for a long time that if it was coming off of international flights, that it was all just automatically being tossed. And I know
Yes.
that certainly over the years, different airlines have made different levels of effort on their own as far as doing that segregation on the flights themselves. But
Yeah.
yeah.
Yep.
Um, there was another question that came in. This one's, I think, more specifically for you, Bill. But when LaGuardia, when the Terminal B was being built, what initiatives were implemented as far as the design, helping to reduce operational waste and increase diversion from a structural side?
Yeah, recycling all the construction waste was a big focus and helped lead to some of those certifications on the lead and vision that we achieved. I can follow up with some of the specifics on the construction waste, but it was very significant in terms of the recovery and reuse of those materials.
Yeah, and
So
if
I would say
I,
that was oh, go ahead, Morgan.
I'm just going to chime in, and I'm sure LaGuardia did this as well, but I had the pleasure of working with JFK New Terminal 1, which is going to be opening soon. And I'm sure there was thought given to planning ahead for multiple streams. So whether there are trash chutes or waste rooms or loading docks, how will we move trash, recycling, composting, donation, baled cardboard? And there are certainly some design elements that can go into a terminal to make it closer to zero waste. Things like bottle filling stations, air dryers with some paper towel dispensers. Definitely, I think the terminal designers are starting to integrate more and more of this stuff to make sure that the operations can achieve their goals as well.
Yeah. And a lot of what we had done, I think, was there was thought given to the operations and movement, especially because we have those pedestrian bridges that sort of connect our
Yeah.
various buildings. And sometimes there's some limited or constrained corridors for that waste to travel through. But thinking about the size of what our janitorial teams are moving, where those pickups are happening across, we have 4 loading docks for us. One is landside, the other 3 are airside waste. And then helping to build out some more of that infrastructure at those loading docks, similar to what Morgan was talking about. So dedicated cardboard balers, oil separation areas, um, organics, like for place for the toters and all that kind of thought.
Yeah, excellent. And just as a reminder for folks, we will have the recording and the slides available at the end. I think we'll hit just a couple more slides before we round up today's program. We had one from Nasia that sort of goes to more broader circular economy and specific to textile waste and efforts that are being made. Um, is anybody able to speak to that question?
Yeah, sure, I can. So when airports are thinking about a circular economy, they're trying to think about the things that they purchase and whether those fixtures, equipment, clothing, uniforms are fit for repair or are designed for disposal. So um, there are certainly programs from several of the airlines where they've recycled, for example, seat leather into new products. One of the things that's gaining traction is for airports to look at either furniture as a service or lighting as a service, where they don't actually own the seats or the light fixtures, they are leasing them, and then the contractor is responsible for their maintenance. And then at the end of their life, the contractor is responsible for finding the next use for those items. So as things come in and out of fashion, can we change out seat cushions? Can we change out fabrics to maintain maybe the seat frame, but not maybe the color that we picked a decade ago? So some of those things are happening. Airports are trying to use their purchasing power to bring in recycled or post-consumer content while still paying attention to reducing and reusing where possible.
Great. Meredith, a question for you. Can you talk a little bit more about how Watts helps an airport in terms of moving towards that aggregating diversion reporting and then targeting operational action, especially when the data is fragmented across the authority, concessions, airlines, haulers?
Yeah, data fragmentation is a common challenge for anybody who's trying to piece together everything. And step one when we're onboarding with a new client is really all about stakeholder mapping. Who are the different stakeholders? Who are your different vendors? What services are they providing? And what are you prioritizing? What do you want out of this engagement? Are you just looking for better reporting in order to meet, a standard that's required? Are you looking for cost savings? Do you want to improve diversion, which hopefully everybody here, that's the goal. And that really helps us to understand like what piece of the pie, what part of the picture to focus on, or maybe it's the whole pie. And then through that mapping process, it's really understanding what those data sources are and who's responsible for them today. How are they getting to the stakeholder? If a service is being provided, there's going to be an invoice. Who's sending the invoice to whom? And how can we follow that paper trail so that we can start to automate that data being received by Watts? Once we've set up those automations, it becomes easier to start to dig into what the metrics are saying because the data starts coming in regularly. And then we can really start to see, if an audit was conducted and there was a lot of liquid in the audit, it starts to look like, okay, where can we focus? How can we focus on getting some of this liquid out of the waste stream? Or digging in deeper, with things like cost savings, that might be Watts automatically flagging anomalies. The client will say, we expect this cost to be between this much and this much every month. And if it's below that or above that, get flagged so that they can assess whether, there was a unique service. FIFA, for example, happened over the course of 2 months. And so they expected the cost to be higher, or maybe it was actually a mistake. And that's something that doesn't require any individual to look at every single invoice manually. It's software flagging when something weird happened so that they can dig in deeper.
Yeah, the things that you don't necessarily know to look for, and it's pulling out the mysterious things in the data. Let's do one last question. I see one here from Emily to the topic of food specifically, and not just simply the stuff that's good for compost, but are there initiatives either at LaGuardia or elsewhere, Morgan, around trying to recover food that can be donated or edible food surplus?
Yeah, I can quickly touch on that for LaGuardia. We did stand up a food donation program. Port Authority has their own food donation program as well, trying to continue that sort of outreach. And yeah, it's been that sort of, I think, takes some extra effort and work with the concession partners, both to understand like the extent of, the liability and just like the Good Samaritan laws that enable food recovery, which they may not always be aware of, to coordinating with the food partners for collection. But yeah, last year we had recovered and donated over 10 tons for Terminal B to Gotham Food Pantry, which is then recirculated to various food shelters and organizations throughout New York City. And then even more was done at Terminal C and other terminals in the Port Authority.
Excellent.
Yeah, and just to elaborate on that, Bill, the Good Samaritan law is probably my second favorite thing to bring up after the international recycling exemption. So we hit both of my pet topics. But um, yes, we airports, I've worked with 45 airports. Many of them do work with their concession partners to donate food and to track that. I will say that the concessionaires are really focused on reducing food waste. So sometimes we'll see food donation numbers go down because the restaurants are really rewriting their menus, projecting their sales, moving one ingredient that didn't sell into another dish. They're really working on reducing food cost. And so they are actively looking at food waste because it's money from their business. And so sometimes we see donation numbers go down because they've just become more efficient in their operations. But they do have an incentive to track that data and to get it to the airport authority if it's being asked for, because they can receive, in some cases, tax rebates for that donation. So they have a good reason, as Meredith was talking about. Where's that kind of carrot and stick, that financial incentive for your behaviors? They do have good incentive to know how many meals they have donated.
Yeah, excellent. Great. Well, we're coming to the end of our time. I have a couple of closing slides that I want to go over. If we can advance the next slide, please. So again, as I've mentioned before, we will have the recording and the slides, and these resources will be posted. Look for an email the next day or two. And also just wanted to flag that we've been, this is one of, we do roughly 7 or 8 of these programs a year. These are all focused in some way coming back to waste reduction, zero waste, recycling, composting, but we've got a full archive of recordings from past programs going back to the last 4 or 5 years. So encourage folks to dive in if there are specific topics like bin and label signage. I put in the chat earlier that we had a great presentation last year from San Francisco Airport about how they do their bin signage, more of a deep dive on that topic. But you can see many of the topics that we have archived there. So I encourage you to look for those on our website at buschsystems.com. Next slide. We will have a survey. We'd love to get your feedback when this program's over. When you log off, you should see a pop-up on your screen with an opportunity to fill out 2 or 3 questions, and we'd love to get your response to that so we can share it with our speakers and help improve these programs. And we'll point out we've got a couple more programs coming up in the near future. We don't have specific dates yet, but I can share our general focus. Next month, we'll have a program focused on hotels and lodging. Again, this is all with a waste reduction, recycling, compost angle. And then in October, we'll be talking about sports arenas and stadiums. So look for more information about these going forward in the near future. And one last time, thank you, Meredith, Bill, Morgan. Great information. You guys are all doing great work and appreciate that. And keep up the good work and look forward to hearing from you down the road.
Thank you.
Yeah. So that brings us to the end of the program. Feel free if you can turn off your cameras now, and I'll just sorry, we're officially ending our program here, but I do want to welcome on my colleague Sarah Hawthorne from our sales department. As I mentioned, we are Busch Systems makes many different types of quality waste and recycling bins, and Sarah's going to tell us a little bit more about some of those things we're doing. Hi, Sarah.
Hey, Alex. Thank you for the fantastic webinar today. It was a lot of great information to absorb. Just like Alex said, my name is Sarah. I'm one of the business development managers here at Busch. Just a little bit about Busch Systems. If you are not familiar with us, we design and manufacture all of our containers with North American source materials. We have celebrated our 41st year in business back in June, and we are a very proud B Corp certified company. If you are not familiar with B Corp, we Basically, it's a very a verified high-level sustainability standards, primarily within our manufacturing processes, as well as our social commitments within our community outreaches. So we here at Busch, we have over 600 SKUs that we can talk about. Going to briefly go over what we have available. As we learned, there are various different areas within an airport that have different collection needs and materials. And we know that not one container is going to collect all of them. So we do have a lot of great containers and options available. We primarily work within plastics, PCR content, metals, stainless steel, recycled lumber, and we also thrive in our customization aspects. As William mentioned, the more consistency within signage and labels and coloring, the better consistent goals that we ultimately are working towards for our increasing those waste diversions. So just going to briefly go over some options that we have available. Feel free to reach out in the chat section if you have any questions. I'd be happy to answer them for you. And I know it's been long and lots of information, so I will make this as quick as possible. So just going back to what we have available, as we've seen in Morgan's slides, that even the back office areas need programs and containers for specific collections. So we have anything from a small desk side container available. This is actually our hanging waste basket that's made from 100% recycled content that we are slowly moving towards. A lot of our product series that will be made with that type of materials. Anything as a personal document container that's locked, battery bin containers, various capacities, shapes, colors, and sizes. We really do love to be involved within those specific projects, pilots, that's going to work well within your facilities, especially capacity. That is a really huge topic that we do like to hone in on when we're speaking with customers, because you have to be kind of aware on which collection stream you're looking at, as well as the capacities. You know, you're not going to want a 50-gallon container that's going to collect food scraps, can become kind of a safety hazard in regards to safety. So I always kind of talk about those specific details within your areas that you're looking for placement of the containers, because a container in a food concession can definitely be different from a container within a security area as well. So moving from kind of a desk side collection, we do have a lot of customers that prefer desk side, and then have the employees be responsible for moving to a centralized station as well. That is clearly labeled, it is colored with restrictive openings as well, which really kind of helps with those specific materials that you may be guessing, you know, is it recyclable? Is it compostable? So really great aspect here at Busch that we do kind of have those options that you can put exact icons, verbiage, whatever you have consistently on property in-house, those materials, we can properly put them on the signage to help with those proper disposals. Another aspect as well in a lot of our products, we have casters or dolly systems available for ease of transport as well. That's super important. This is our waste watcher. We also do have specifically geared airport containers. This is our Boca stainless steel container. It is an extremely durable container that has a not necessarily locking, but it definitely has a hinged lid that will not fall down during servicing. It has a bottom tray in case any type of bag liner rips, so you're not having to deal with the mess at the bottom, as well as it's lockable. We do understand that depending on the specific area within the airport, that's very important. Not wanting any of the contents or liners to be taken out for obvious safety reasons. So we do have a lot of products that are lockable. The biggest benefit of this Boca, it's actually a self-extinguishing container, which is fantastic. This is our Summit unit that comes in 2 different sizes as well. This is our standard 15-gallon capacity, and we also go up to a 32-gallon capacity as well for our XL version. And like you can see here, we have those 2 different servicing aspects. You have a top load, or we have containers that do have a front load with liners that come out for ease of service. We have some customers that actually kind of go above and beyond on adding body decals or labeling to also help in that regard for proper disposal. We do find with specifically airports, they do prefer to use icons versus verbiage with a lot of multicultural folks that come through. Just makes it a little bit easier in regards to that correct disposal. We do have sign frame options as well, casters like I mentioned. This is our Fusion unit. It's at a 36-gallon capacity each stream, which is one of our newest products. We're very excited about it. But it is kind of a mix of mixed recycling, or it's a mix of PCR content with the plastics as well as recycled lumber. So extremely durable. And the fantastic part about it is that you have the option of all 4 sides, which is really unique because you want to have that clear messaging that can be kind of that 360 effect that can be extremely helpful for correct disposal. And then we also do have a play on an outdoor version as well. So going back to that consistent look that you can have matching containers indoor and out for all of the public eye to kind of see and register and know where they can properly dispose their materials. And we do also have modular units as well as full body units. So depending on your program, depending on your placement, you do have that benefit of the whole body container that is together. So the waste and the recycling are together, so they're not moving back and forth. Or we have the modular units that if your program or collection streams ever change, you do have that ability to add and take away and not having to repurchase that whole system within the whole entire airport. So really great benefits that we do have available within our product selection, and we're always happy to touch base with our product or with our customers. We can offer virtual meetings just like this to kind of get a little bit more close, in-depth product information, samples, you name it. We're happy to get involved and make sure that you have a successful program put into place, as we all know that lots of moving pieces, especially within an airport setting. And I think that's it.
Great. Thanks, Sarah. I know there was a question about batteries, and you mentioned we do have a bin for batteries specifically.
Yes, specific batteries. They do come in 2 different colors. It's at a 2.5 gallon capacity. So we also have cut open holes in the lids for easy access as well. And as well as a convenient carrying handle for servicing aspects, depending on where you're going to dispose.
Great. Good. I think that's what I've seen coming in. If anybody has a final question, feel free to toss it into the Q&A. But otherwise, I think we are set.
Fantastic. Thank you everyone for sticking on, and feel free to reach out anytime if you have any questions or inquiries.
Great. Thank you, Sarah. Okay. Thank you, everybody. Have a good day.